He wasn't supposed to be home that early. Lewis Johnson had planned a grand surprise: roses, a violinist, and a chef waiting in the car. But when he opened the gate, laughter turned into silence. There, on the front porch, stood Genevieve, his fiancée, clutching a bucket dripping with filthy water. Across from her, his mother, sister, and little Selma stood soaked, gasping in shock. "Genevieve, what have you done?" Lewis barked, voice trembling with disbelief. "Lewis, please, it's not what you think." But he didn't listen. The roses fell. The violinist stopped playing. And just like that, the woman who once healed his broken heart was thrown out of his life, accused, disgraced, and speechless. Months would pass before he learned the truth, a truth so cruel it shattered everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and family. And that's where her story truly began. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Lewis Johnson stood in the doorway like a statue, the sound of dripping water echoing through his mansion's grand foyer. The air smelled faintly of bleach and betrayal. Genevieve's hands trembled as the bucket slipped from her grasp and clanged to the marble floor, sending dirty water across the white tiles. Miriam gasped. Brenda clutched Selma to her chest, whispering words only a snake could form sweetly. "Lewis, listen to me," Genevieve began, stepping closer. But he raised a hand. "Don't. Not a word." His eyes, once filled with admiration, now burned with disbelief. He couldn't reconcile the woman he'd planned to marry, the one who laughed with Selma over pancakes, who sang lullabies beside LaToya's portrait, with the woman standing before him, accused of humiliating his family. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, his tone softening only for Miriam. "I'm fine, my son," Miriam sniffled, dabbing her wet blouse dramatically. "But look at your daughter. Look at what she did." Selma, only 9, stood frozen, her little dress soaked, her eyes wide and confused. She looked between her father and Genevieve, torn between love and fear. Lewis turned back to Genevieve. "You poured dirty water on my child?" "No. Lewis, please, it wasn't me," Brenda interrupted. "We all saw it. She was standing there with the bucket. What more proof do you need?" Genevieve's lips parted in disbelief. "Brenda, you know that's not true." "You." "Enough," Lewis thundered. His voice reverberated through the house, the same voice that had once calmed boardrooms now shattering the heart of the only woman who had healed his own. "Pack your things. I can't do this." "Lewis, you can't just." "Now, Genevieve." Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision as she turned toward the staircase, the same one she'd once decorated with Christmas lights and laughter. The walls seemed to watch silently as she climbed, each step heavier than the last. Miriam reached for her son's arm. "You did the right thing. She fooled us all." Lewis didn't answer. His chest heaved with anger, confusion, and something far darker, guilt. Yet, pride drowned it out. He heard drawers open upstairs, then the soft sound of a zipper. When Genevieve descended, suitcase in hand, Selma tried to run toward her, but Brenda's grip tightened around the child's shoulders. Genevieve knelt anyway. "Selma, I love you, okay? No matter what happens, remember that." Selma's eyes filled with tears, but Brenda hissed, "Don't listen to her. She hurt us." Lewis turned away. He couldn't bear to look at her. Outside, rain began to fall, as if the heavens themselves couldn't hold back. Genevieve stood at the gate, soaked to the skin, watching the lights of Lewis's mansion dim one by one. For weeks, silence filled the spaces she used to occupy. Her coffee mug remained untouched on the kitchen shelf. Her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway. Selma grew quieter. Miriam and Brenda grew bolder, taking charge of the home with an authority that even Lewis didn't challenge. But the nights weren't kind to him. He often woke sweating from dreams, Genevieve's face fading into rain, her voice echoing, "Lewis, please believe me." At work, he buried himself in meetings, mergers, and numbers, convincing himself he'd done the right thing. But every success felt hollow. He started returning home later, avoiding the living room where that awful night had unfolded. Brenda, ever watchful, noticed. "You're too soft, Lewis. Forget her. She was never one of us." He nodded absently, but a storm brewed behind his eyes. Then, one afternoon, he found something strange. A note tucked into Selma's sketchbook. It wasn't written by Genevieve. It was a drawing of the night in question. 3 stick figures. One woman holding a bucket, 2 others hiding behind her. Above it, a shaky caption. Auntie Brenda told me not to tell Daddy. Louis froze. His breath caught in his throat. He looked at his daughter's handwriting. Innocent, trembling, honest. That night, he watched Selma at dinner. She barely spoke, just poked at her food. He waited until Miriam and Brenda retired upstairs before crouching beside her chair. Princess, he whispered, tell Daddy the truth. What really happened that night? Selma's spoon clattered to the plate. Her lip quivered. Daddy, Auntie Brenda said she wanted to teach Miss Jen a lesson. She said Grandma doesn't like her. They told me not to say anything. I'm sorry. Her words cut through him like glass. Louis sat there, stunned. The empire he'd built, the image of control, the pride he'd held, all crumbled under the weight of his daughter's trembling confession. Upstairs, he heard laughter, Miriam's and Brenda's, echoing through the hallway. Something inside him snapped. He stood, his jaw tightening, eyes blazing not with confusion this time, but purpose. The next morning, the storm that had been brewing in his heart finally broke loose. Louis didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, staring into the gray dawn as thunder rumbled in the distance. His coffee grew cold, untouched. The house was still, too still, except for the faint ticking of the antique clock Genevieve once polished every Sunday. He looked at Selma's drawing again, those innocent lines that shattered everything he believed. Auntie Brenda told me not to tell Daddy. How could he have missed it? How could he have been so blind? When the first light broke, Louis rose, straightened his robe, and headed for the guest wing where his mother and sister slept. His footsteps were measured, heavy with restrained fury. Miriam opened her door, adjusting her scarf. Louis, why are you up so early? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Brenda's door and pushed it open without knocking. Brenda, startled, blinked from her bed. Louis, what on earth? Get up. What's wrong with you? I said get up. The tone in his voice froze both women in place. For years, they had watched him as the calm, disciplined man who rarely raised his voice. This time, something in his eyes said don't test me. He threw Selma's drawing on the bed. Explain that. Brenda's face drained of color. Where did you get that? From my daughter's book. Now tell me why she wrote that you told her not to speak. Louis, you're overreacting, Miriam started, forcing a smile. Children imagine things. Enough, mother. His tone sliced through her words. For months, I doubted the woman I loved. For months, I believed my family, my own blood, while Genevieve begged me to hear her out. Brenda tried to grab the drawing, but Louis's hand slammed down on the table beside her. You think I don't know the truth now? You poured that water, didn't you? Brenda trembled. It was supposed to scare her off. We didn't mean. Miriam gasped. Brenda. Louis's breath hitched. So it's true. Brenda's voice broke. She was changing everything, Louis. You stopped asking us before making decisions. She made you soft. She made Selma love her more than us. We just wanted her gone. He stepped back, disgusted. You humiliated her in front of my child on her birthday. Miriam's lips trembled. Son, please, we did it for you. That woman, he cut in sharply, was the first person who made me smile again after Latoya died. She loved Selma like her own. She respected you, mother, even when you looked down on her. And I threw her out because I believed your lies. Silence filled the room, heavy and choking. Selma stood by the door now, small fingers clutching her teddy bear. Her voice was barely a whisper. Daddy, is Miss Jen coming back? Louis turned to her, heart breaking all over again. I'll find her, sweetheart. I promise. Miriam reached out to touch his arm, but he stepped away. You and Brenda will leave my house today. Louis, you can't. I can, he said, his voice low but steady. Because I finally remembered something my wife used to tell me. If peace leaves your home, it's never because of the stranger, but because of those you trusted most. By noon, the house was silent again. Only this time, it felt cleaner. Brenda's laughter no longer echoed down the halls. Miriam's perfume no longer lingered in the kitchen. But emptiness didn't bring peace. Regret did not erase damage. Louis knew where Genevieve worked, the small pharmacy in Lecky Phase 1, the same one where they'd first met. He remembered that day vividly. Selma had scraped her knee, and Genevieve knelt with gentle hands and calm eyes, cleaning the wound like it was her own child. That was the moment he knew she was different. Now he stood outside that same pharmacy, nervous like a man on his first date. His heart pounded as he walked in. She was at the counter, her back to him, arranging boxes on a shelf. Her braids were shorter, her frame thinner. She'd lost weight. "Genevieve," he said softly. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Their eyes met, his filled with remorse, hers with restrained pain. "What are you doing here, Louis?" "I came to apologize." She laughed bitterly, wiping her hands. "Took you long enough." "I know. I was blind, and I let pride destroy everything." He swallowed. "Selma told me what really happened. Brenda confessed. I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am." She looked down, silent. The ticking clock behind the counter seemed to grow louder. "I lost my job after that scandal," she said finally. "People whispered. They said I was violent, that I attacked your family. You didn't even ask for my side." "I know," he said, voice breaking. "And I hate myself for it." She shook her head. "Louis, you can't undo what's done." He took a deep breath. "No, but I can rebuild what's broken, if you'll let me." There was a long pause. Then, a small voice came from the doorway. "Miss Jen." Genevieve turned. Selma stood there, clutching a small bouquet of sunflowers. Louis smiled faintly. She insisted on coming. Genevieve's expression softened. She knelt, tears glistening in her eyes as Selma handed her the flowers. "I missed you," Selma whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't tell Daddy sooner." Genevieve hugged her tightly. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not your fault." When she looked up at Louis again, her voice was calmer. "You hurt me deeply, Louis. But seeing you here, with her, maybe there's still something worth saving." He nodded. "I'll do anything it takes. Counseling, therapy, prayer, whatever you want." She studied him, as though searching for sincerity. "Then start by proving I can trust you again." He exhaled shakily. "You have my word." As he left that evening, rain began to fall again. But this time, it felt cleansing, not cruel. He looked up, letting the drops hit his face. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something new, fragile, but real. At home, he walked through the quiet halls and whispered to Latoya's portrait, "I failed once, but not again. I'll make it right." And for the first time in months, peace didn't feel impossible, just distant, waiting to be earned. 2 months passed, but the echoes of that night never left Louis's mind. Every time he walked into the kitchen, he imagined Genevieve humming over breakfast. Every evening, when the sun sank behind the city skyline, he caught himself glancing toward the gate, hoping, praying she'd appear again. Selma's laughter had returned, but softly, like a bird learning to sing after a storm. She spoke often of Genevieve now, how she used to braid her hair, how she prayed with her at night. Those memories were both balm and burden to Louis. He didn't rush Genevieve. Instead, he chose patience. Every day, he sent her a short message. Not pleading, not romantic, just updates. Selma aced her spelling test. "The kitchen still smells like your pancakes. We miss you." Sometimes, she replied. Sometimes, she didn't. But he kept showing up, in small ways that spoke louder than flowers or apologies. One Sunday, she invited him to her church. Not a grand cathedral, but a modest community chapel tucked between two shops. Louis arrived early, dressed simply, no chauffeur, no designer suit. When Genevieve saw him sitting quietly beside Selma in the front pew, she smiled for the first time in months. After the service, she led him to a small park nearby. Children laughed around them. Life felt ordinary again. "I've been watching," she said softly. "You're trying, Louis. But rebuilding trust isn't about doing things. It's about being different." "I understand," he replied. "And I want to be different." She studied his face, searching for pride, the same pride that once blinded him. But this time, she saw humility, raw and real. "Then let's start from the beginning," she said. "No titles, no promises. Just two people learning to forgive." For weeks, they met at the park, talked, laughed, sometimes cried. Genevieve spoke of the nights she couldn't sleep, the humiliation she endured, the fear of loving him again. Louis listened, not to defend himself, but to understand. One evening, Selma joined them with a small box wrapped in paper. "Open it," she said shyly. Inside was a photograph, an old one, from the day Genevieve moved in years ago. Selma's smile beamed between them, arms around both adults. On the back, She had written in careful handwriting, "My family." Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes. "You kept this?" Louis nodded. "It's what kept me going." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time we come home." The following weekend, Louis prepared the house quietly. No grand gestures this time. No musicians. No roses. Just peace. He hung new curtains, fixed the kitchen tap she'd always complained about, and placed a simple welcome card on the dining table. When Genevieve and Selma arrived, Miriam and Brenda's absence was still felt, but the atmosphere was lighter, warmer. "I didn't realize how empty this place was without you," he said. Genevieve smiled faintly. "Let's not talk about the past tonight." Dinner was humble, yam porridge and grilled fish, but it tasted better than any feast Louis had ever had. Selma talked nonstop, joy dancing in her voice. Afterward, they watched an old family movie, the kind Genevieve used to roll her eyes at but secretly loved. Weeks turned into months. Healing came quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. They began counseling together, not to fix what was broken, but to learn new ways of seeing each other. Louis learned to listen without defending. Genevieve learned to trust slowly, one day at a time. When he proposed again, it wasn't in a grand hall or fancy resort. It was on the same porch where everything had fallen apart. He knelt, not as a billionaire, not as a man trying to erase his mistakes, but as a man ready to start anew. "Genevieve," he said, voice trembling, "I can't change the past, but I can spend the rest of my life proving that love deserves another chance. Will you marry me? Again, this time without fear?" She smiled through tears. "Only if you promise to never throw roses again." He laughed softly. "Deal." Selma squealed, running to hug them both. "Does this mean we're a family again?" Louis kissed her forehead. "Yes, my love. For good this time." Their wedding was simple. Family, friends, soft music, and no drama. Miriam and Brenda attended, surprisingly, sitting quietly in the back. After months of reflection, even they had changed, humbled by the consequences of their actions. When the ceremony ended, Miriam approached Genevieve, eyes wet. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered. Genevieve held her gaze. "You don't have to deserve it. Just never repeat the pain." For once, Miriam nodded, truly understanding. Later that night, Louis stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights with Genevieve beside him. "You know," he said, "I thought love was about perfection, but it's really about endurance." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And forgiveness." Selma ran up to them, wrapping her arms around both. "Can we say the family prayer?" They joined hands, three voices whispering into the quiet night. Grateful, redeemed, whole again. Louis looked at the two most important women in his life and thought, maybe the greatest riches aren't in money, but in mercy. Moral of the story. In the end, Louis learned that betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. It often hides behind familiar smiles. But love, when sincere, has the power to heal what lies could never destroy. Genevieve's forgiveness became the mirror of his redemption, and Selma's innocence reminded them that truth always finds its way home. Forgiveness didn't erase the scars. It simply made them proof of survival. If this story touched you, like this video, subscribe to King's Folklore, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters.